Hi everyone, Samir and Samit here, and welcome back to our Formula One podcast.
Today we'll be talking about the 2023 Italian Grand Prix.
And once again, another exciting Italian Grand Prix. I think what is this? Ever since 2019, we've been having really exciting races.
Yeah, we saw a return to form for one team during this
Yeah,
weekend,
definitely.
and it was overall a really exciting race, like you were saying, because there was just so much more closer racing than we've seen in quite a bit of previous years.
Yeah, so going into this weekend, the main talking point is that Max Verstappen was looking to set the new world record of 10 wins in succession, and he would certainly be looking like he was going to do that in FP1 as he topped the timing sheets ahead of the home hero Carlos Sainz driving for the home team Ferrari, and Max Verstappen was just on it this session so far.
Yeah, and also he obviously wants to get that record. Obviously,
Yeah.
all drivers they say, "Oh, we don't care about those records," but deep down, it gives you a lot of satisfaction to get that record
Yeah.
because ultimately you want to be the best in Formula One, and so Verstappen was definitely looking to get that record.
Yeah. Also, in this weekend, Ferrari ran a new livery to celebrate just their home race, and it had a lot more yellow than normal, and it looked really nice in my opinion. The drivers had different helmets, and they had new race suits as well.
Also, the other Italian team too, Alfa Romeo, they also had a new livery, and it was really cool. It was like
Yeah.
black, and then it had green, white, and red for like the Italian colors,
Yeah.
and it was a really cool livery. I liked how clean it
Yeah. I
was.
like it. Yeah. So what during this session though, one of the Alfa Romeos of Zhou Guan Yu had a problem and he had to be wheeled back into his garage because he had a problem. Every time he pulled the clutch, it just went into anti-stall. So he kept complaining about that, and also with Valtteri Bottas as well.
Yeah, both Alfa Romeo struggling with transmission problems,
Yeah.
but it was a quick fix for them, and they were able to get back out and get more running in.
Yeah, and it was pretty overcast conditions in this session, so definitely not as hot track temperatures as we would see later on through qualifying. But so this session was more about teams just trying to get their setups right.
Yep. Another thing too, it would be another race for Liam Lawson this weekend.
Yeah.
After debuting in Zandvoort, he would be again filling in for the injured Daniel Ricciardo, and it would be interesting to see how Lawson would get used
Yeah.
to the Alpha Tauri again this year. Last year, another debutee, Nick De Vries, he made his debut here and really impressed. But as we know, what happened to De Vries, he just wasn't good enough in the Alpha Tauri. So it'd be interesting to see how Lawson would do here and whether that would help him with a seat for the future.
Yeah, also driving in this session was Aston Martin reserve driver Felipe Drugovich. The reigning Formula 2 champion got another shot behind an F1 car in an F1 session, so he would certainly be looking to make the most out of that.
hmm And again, we saw here in FP1, it was more traffic. So
Yeah.
obviously it would be like you said, Felipe Drugovich first time in this track, so he would be finding out about all the traffic in F1 here, and we saw people like Yuki Tsunoda getting traffic. And with Monza, it's like a really short and fast track,
Yeah.
so there's oftentimes you get a lot of cars in your way, especially towards the end of the parabolica. And so
Yeah.
it was it can be really frustrating for drivers to get hampered when they're on their fast lap.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso in his Aston Martin too was also looking pretty good. He finished the session in P6, so another nice showing from a somewhat inconsistent Aston Martin team so far.
Yeah, Aston Martin have kind of fallen off. They bounced back
Yeah.
in Zandvoort with Alonso's P2 finish, but they need to find more consistency like they had in the beginning of the
Yeah.
year. Also, we saw the ever consistent Alex Albon in FP1. He was going pretty well
Yeah.
until he had a moment exiting the Ascari chicane where he went onto that gravit on the exit curb and he almost sent his Williams into the wall, but he was able to save it.
Yeah. So we saw also a few struggles from Max Verstappen going into turn one, locking up a few times. But other than that, it was smooth sailing for him, and he topped the times ahead of Carlos Sainz. And Sergio Perez was right up there in P3 with just a tenth back. Then came Leclerc, then Russell, Alonso, Norris, Hamilton, Sonoda, and then Alex Albon.
So now going on to FP2, and towards the end of the session, we saw a spin for Sergio Perez at the exit of the Parabolica.
Yeah.
He got his left hand side into the gravel, and he just basically slightly shunted it into the wall, and he
Yeah.
couldn't get it up because it was beached, and his car was also damaged, and so
Yeah.
that was pretty bad from Sergio Perez once again, especially now with the new threat of Ricardo um trying to take his seat for 2025, possibly even 2024. And then obviously you have Liam Lawson now coming in and making his Formula 1 debuts. And so it was like not at all entirely good for Sergio Perez. With all this pressure, Formula 1 can really get to you from the mental aspect. But it was important for Perez. He showed really good pace in FP1, but just the lack of concentration in this shunt in FP2 was not good for him.
Yeah, definitely. Also, we saw during, and that obviously that crash brought out a red flag. It was a pretty big crash, so they needed to repair. Also like that area where the gravel was, they need to clear the track and all of that. But also, we saw Lance Stroll have a problem with his Aston Martin, and he had to be pulled off into the area where Alex Albon had his moment in FP1. He had to get pulled off into that escape road there. So just another big problem for Lance Stroll. And there was also a lot more traffic with Max Verstappen. He was complaining about not being able to get another lap in due to the red flag, and his engineer was telling him to try to calm down. But Verstappen obviously just trying to get a proper reference lap in, so just showing how much he's willing to work to make sure everything is perfect.
Yeah, like as we're talking about, the again a lot of traffic in the Monza circuit, just not helping out the world champion.
Yeah.
But it looked like the team that had a lot of pace were Ferrari. Carlos Sainz topped the session in FP2, and it didn't seem to be looking like a fluke, like oh just a practice fluke. Like the Ferraris
Yeah.
genuinely seem to have a lot of pace at their home track.
Yeah. Science did have a moment going through the first chicane. Well, the second set of chicanes. But luckily he was able to keep it on the track, and Leclerc also having a moment at turns 1 and 2, just not getting the exit that he needed properly. But yeah, Ferraris are still looking pretty consistent, and they are genuinely looking like fast race cars.
Yeah, also McLaren too, like another resurgence in teams.
Yeah.
Could we possibly see maybe that old McLaren versus Ferrari battle during this
Yeah.
race? Because Lando Norris certainly looked like he had a lot of pace. That McLaren now we know is like a pretty fast car ever
Yeah.
since Silverstone.
Yeah, and obviously not just in the hands of Norris as well, because Piastri was also up there in the session. It was Sainz in P1, Norris in P2, Perez was up there in P3, and Piastri was up there in P4. So not just Norris putting the pressure on, but also Piastri as well. And that's something McLaren need desperately after the last couple of seasons where they've only had one driver really pushing. To have them have two drivers now will help them a lot in their constructors battle.
Yeah, we know McLaren have gone pretty well
Yeah.
around Monza these past few years. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo taking their last win for them in 2021, and then in 2022 they had a pretty decent race. So we
Yeah.
know McLaren likes the Monza track, but it's a question of now at this point who can effectively go the fastest down the straights, because Monza is such a high-speed track that effectively even like through the corners, if you're good, if you don't have that straight line speed, you're gonna be really slow.
So it was after Piastri in P4, it was Verstappen in fifth, Leclerc sixth, Albon seventh. Once again, Albon up there in the top 10. Alonso eighth, Russell struggling in ninth, and Hamilton was nowhere to be seen in the top 10 because Nico Hulkenberg completed the top 10. So Mercedes definitely had their work cut out for them.
Yeah, we know Mercedes aren't the strongest on the straights, and so
Yeah.
that'll really like hurt them at this track, and so it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see how they would cope with that during qualifying and the race.
Yeah, so now moving on to the Saturday and FP3, and once again, Carlos Sainz looking like the quickest man, not only quicker than his teammate, but quicker than Max Verstappen as well. And he topped the sessions again. And on the day of qualifying, that's exactly what he would want to see, and exactly what the Tifosi would want to see.
Yeah, Sainz really showing he has the speed to
Yeah.
challenge Verstappen at this track, and it would be interesting to see whether Sainz could actually stop Verstappen from getting that 10th win in a row.
Yeah. Also, throughout the session, we saw Lewis Hamilton struggling with traffic at the very last corner. One of the Williams, getting in his way, and he was just, that caught him off guard as he was trying to make an adjustment on his steering wheel and just didn't anticipate how slow the Williams was going. So, he nearly ran into the back of him, but luckily he was able to keep it out of any contact.
Yeah, again, he also had some more traffic. Again, like we've been saying, the Monza traffic will really bite you. But even in clean air,
Yeah,
Hamilton couldn't get any good laps in. Like he at one point, his engineer said he was like 4 tenths down from Verstappen, and Hamilton,
yeah.
even Lewis Hamilton himself said he couldn't gain that much time back. So that just shows like how off the pace the W14 is in Monza.
Yeah, another driver who was going pretty well was Liam Lawson around Monza. He wasn't in the top 10 at the end of the session, but he was P12, which is still a decent result for AlphaTauri, considering their woes this year and how slow their car's been and how they've had more drivers than points so far.
Yeah, that's kind of sad for Alpha Tauri,
Yeah,
especially within the Red Bull family.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah, again though, we saw another driver that seemed pretty happy was Fernando Alonso. Alonso was doing pretty decent, he finished the session in fifth place. So that was pretty good for Aston Martin, who were trying to get on a resurgence. And there was a funny moment when his engineer said like everyone around you is slow laps, and then Alonso said, yeah, everyone is slow, they'll have a bad surprise in qualifying. So that
Yeah,
was pretty funny. But it looks like Alonso maybe has more confidence this weekend, so that'll be fun
yeah.
to see.
Also, another driver having problems was Yuki Tsunoda being impeded by Carlos Sainz and was not happy about it at all. And we know how annoyed Yuki Tsunoda gets easily. And also, Lando Norris was having issues with an Alfa Romeo at the first Lesmo. So, and he was just complaining about why people aren't looking. And it wasn't one McLaren; it was two McLarens who were having issues, and it was Oscar Piastri also having problems with Carlos Sainz as well. And also Piastri was having a moment at the Ascari chicane as he went off the track at the exit of the right hand corner and went off into the gravel, but luckily kept his engine going and didn't hit the wall.
Yeah, it wasn't a great session for Piastri. Like even though
Yeah.
he seemed fairly good in FP2, Piastri wasn't even in the top 10 during this session. So
Yeah.
it wasn't that good of a session for the Australian because he was just struggling with so many things. But it would like come qualifying, we'd hope to see if Piastri could match his teammate Lando Norris. But we also saw some unusual problems in the pit lane. When Nico Hulkenberg was entering his pit box, the Aston Martin pit box is right in front of them. And so there was like this Aston Martin mechanic that was really close to Hulkenberg when Hulkenberg was pulling into his pit box. And so he was not happy about that, like saying that the Aston Martin guy was like dreaming or something. So
Yeah.
that was like pretty scary moment in the pit lane, but thankfully no one got hurt.
Yeah, another weird moment was for Logan Sargent when he was coming at the exit of the corner where Piastri went off. He hit a little bit of gravel, but not too much because he was still on the curb. So it must have been some extra gravel that was on the curb there, and it just flicked up into the air and broke his left hand wing mirror. So that was another weird moment.
Yeah, a lot of drivers are getting caught out by the gravel at the exit of the Della Roggia chicane,
Yeah,
and so that would be interesting to see. Like in the race, like if someone gets out of shape there, it'll pose an opportunity for the cars behind to attack them, and that driver will also lose a lot of positions.
yeah.
Another driver that was having trouble with gravel was Valtteri Bottas at the Ascari chicane. He just went straight on into the
Yeah.
gravel, and there was definitely some damage to the bottom of his Alfa Romeo.
Yeah. So at the end of FP3, then it was Carlos Sainz once again in P1 ahead of Max Verstappen in second. Hamilton was up there in third, but 5 tenths off the pace of Carlos Sainz. Leclerc 5 tenths and more behind Carlos Sainz. So not good at all from Leclerc to be that far off his teammate.
It was like not at all like what Leclerc would need. Especially at Monza, when Ferrari drivers are battling for top spot to like show that they're
Yeah,
supreme for their team in at their home track. Leclerc would definitely not want to be off the pace of his teammate, especially after winning here in
yeah.
2019 after that thrilling race. One would expect Leclerc to be the favorite, to be the lead Ferrari.
Yeah, definitely. And behind Leclerc was a Fernando Alonso, who was once a golden boy at Ferrari, but down in P5, 7/10 off Carlos Sainz. Then Kevin Magnussen in 7th and Hulkenberg in 8th. So both Hasses going really well around Monza. And then Albon again in the top 10. And Sergio Perez down in P10, more than a second behind his teammate Max Verstappen. So if you thought that Leclerc off Sainz was bad, then Perez off Verstappen is even worse.
Yeah, again, Perez struggling for qualifying performance.
Yeah,
Now, going into qualifying, again, they would be trialing this new format that they did in Hungary, where they had to run the hard tires in Q1, the medium tires in Q2, and then finally the soft tires in Q3. So in Q1, it was a little bit of a jumbled order. After the first runs, we only saw Piastri down in 19th, and both Alpines were still in the bottom five, and the likes of Valtteri Bottas and Lance Stroll were also there too. But on the second runs, Bottas was greatly improving, and he crossed the line 12th. But Zhou Guanyu in the other Alfa Romeo couldn't improve, and he stayed 15th. And then next up came the rookie Oscar Piastri, and he put his car into P8. Then we saw Logan Sargent in the Williams acing the first sector and
yeah.
middle sector, and then going to the end, he went up to P5.
Wow, I didn't expect that.
Definitely, like Logan Sargent was like going really strong in Q1. It would be exciting to see if he could keep that up in Q2.
I mean, yeah, he's still behind Alex Albon, still like 3/10 off his teammate, but still, for him to be up there in P5, ahead of a Ferrari, a McLaren, and an Aston Martin, and both Mercedes, there's something I can't comprehend quite yet.
Both McLarens
Yeah,
actually, and Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton.
yeah. I mean, we'll see though. It's just Q1, but other drivers were looking to complete their lap times now as Liam Lawson crossed the line to go down in P10, which quickly became P11 as Hamilton crossed the line and only went up to P7. So the seven-time world champion, the greatest driver of all time, could not beat Logan Sargent's lap time. Uh,
Wow, absolutely incredible.
yeah,
And but on the other side of the spectrum, it was an absolute disaster for both Alpines, as both
yeah.
Ocon and Gasly got knocked out in Q1, and it was just really, really bad
Mm-hmm.
for the French outfit, as they need points to further themselves in the championship, and this was not at all how they would want this weekend to
Yeah.
go.
So the five we lost from Q1 were Lance Stroll, Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, and Zhou Guanyu. So those five kind of, well, both Alpines were a little bit of a shock, but other than that, I think everyone else is more or less what I expected.
Yep, going on into Q2 now, saw Logan Sargent after impressing in Q1. We wanted to see if he could do anything in Q2, but the American driver on his last run only stayed 14th, and he was like 6/10 off the
Yeah.
pace of Yuki Tsunoda, and so it was absolute disappointment for the American driver in Monza.
I mean, yeah, if you look at the replay though, if you look at the final corner at least where they had the camera on him, he was pushing it throughout that lap to try to get it. So clearly he wasn't pushing hard enough, but I mean, he was still tried his best, I think. And I guess like he said in the interview, I think just by that time the tires were just off, the temperature were through the roof and everything. So I guess he tried his best, but clearly if Albon is up there in P4, then there's obviously something he could have done.
Yeah. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, finally was able to beat Logan Sargent. He went up just behind Alex Albon.
Yeah.
And then we saw Charles Leclerc go fastest in the Ferrari, ahead of Sainz and ahead of
Yeah.
Verstappen. And then next up came Liam Lawson in the Alpha Tauri. Alpha Tauri obviously know how to win around here. Lawson
Yep.
wouldn't be able to put it into the top 10, so he stayed behind Yuki Tsunoda in 12th place. Hulkenberg couldn't improve, but Oscar Piastri did. Piastri went up to 8th, and then Verstappen right then overtook Leclerc for P1 as Valtteri Bottas couldn't improve, and that left both AlphaTauris knocked out. Tsunoda and Lawson 11th and 12th. Then came Hulkenberg 13th, Bottas 14th, and Logan Sargent in 15th.
Yep. So now going on into Q3 and the final chance to get any lap together and to put it on pole position for the race. And after the first set of runs, Max Verstappen was looking quickest as he looked to complete his lap first. He had blitzed the middle sector and was looking really good on his lap. And as he set a time for the others to chase, it was a 120.6, and the others were now looking to complete their laps. And Sergio Perez crossed the line, and he couldn't beat his teammate. He was behind by 3/10 of a second. Then came Charles Leclerc in his Ferrari, or after as he came up to the line, he blitzed the middle sector, and he was looking quicker than Max Verstappen. As he crossed the line, he went quickest overall by 1/10 of a second. So that came out of nowhere. Leclerc going quicker than Max Verstappen. Certainly something that I didn't expect to see.
Yeah, that was like insane. Like we haven't seen the Red Bulls even close to being touched this year besides like Budapest, and then all of a sudden we saw Leclerc out of nowhere come out and beat Verstappen, and then it was Carlos Sainz that came and beat both Verstappen and Leclerc. So that was absolute scenes for the Ferrari fans at Monza, and it was both Ferraris from both Red Bulls from both McLarens for the time being because Piastri couldn't beat Norris, who was behind Sergio Perez, and so that would be really interesting to see for the final set of Q3 runs whether Ferrari could actually get a front row lockout. I think for the first time since 2018.
Yeah, and Fernando Alonso once was P4, went tumbling down quite like your microphone, and now he was down in P9, and only Lewis Hamilton was left now to complete his time. And as Hamilton completed his time, he only went up into P9, so Alonso now tumbled all the way down into P10.
I think Alonso's on used tires or something because he was like
Yeah.
3/10 down on the McLarens, and so I don't think Alonso's that slow, so he was probably on used tires.
Yeah, now for the final set of runs, it was Leclerc who was looking to complete his lap first, and he was ahead of Max Verstappen, but not too close where Verstappen would get the slipstream. So Leclerc would be the first one to set a time for everyone to chase, and he set a very fast first sector. It was purple, so he was pushing definitely to try and find a great time. Verstappen could not beat Leclerc's first sector, so it was all to play for now between the top three. Sainz had improved on his first time, but still not improved to beat Leclerc. So it was now pretty much neck and neck between the two Ferraris, and Leclerc pushing even more found a purple second sector, so he was absolutely on it, and you could just tell by the way he was driving, the way he flicked the car into each corner. It reminded me about his qualifying lap in Austria, if you remember back to that. And Leclerc now through the final corner, he was finding even more pace, but Sainz was finding even more pace compared to Leclerc because he had set a purple middle sector, and he was now a 10th up on his teammate. Verstappen had put in two personal best sectors, but it would we would have to see where he could put it. As Leclerc crossed the line, he went up into pole position by 1/10 of a second, so not that much in it between the two Ferraris. But as Verstappen crossed the line, he came and retook pole position by 5/100ths of a second, so that would have wiped the smile off Leclerc's face. And then Carlos Sainz, as he crossed the line, he came and took pole position by just 1/100th of a second, and Carlos Sainz was on pole position at Monza for Ferrari.
It was an absolutely incredible lap from Carlos Sainz right at the end
Yeah.
to take pole position for the Tifosi in Ferrari colors, and it was definitely one of the proudest moments of Carlos Sainz's career
Yeah.
right there. And right at the end, we saw Sergio Perez go up to fourth place behind Leclerc, but Perez was 3/10 behind Leclerc, Verstappen, and Sainz. So a pretty disappointing time for Sergio Perez. And Alex Albon right at the end went up to fifth place behind Sergio Perez, but we waited for the Mercedes challenge. Russell went up to P4 ahead of Perez, and Lewis Hamilton was only able to stay in 8th place as Piastri kept 7th and Lando Norris kept 9th, with Fernando Alonso completing the top 10.
Yeah, everybody was talking about how great of a lap Sainz was. I was talking about how bad Logan Sargent was. If Albon can finish P6 over here, just 4 tenths off the Ferrari, and Sargent can't even get out of Q2, not even like P12 or P11. He was down in P15, and Albon was out here pulling miracles for Williams.
Yeah, pretty disappointing for Logan Sargent after Alex Albon is currently wiping the floor with him this
Yeah.
season. But it was all we waited to see what he could do in the race.
Yeah. So now moving on into the race, and just before the race even got started, Yuki Tsunoda's day had already come to an end with an engine failure, with smoke pouring out of the back of his Alpha Tauri just on the formation lap, right before the parabolica. He had to pull over and right next to the escape road, and so they would have to go around for another formation lap because they had to clear the Alpha Tauri.
And there was also like a lot of confusion too when
Yeah.
Sonoda's car got pulled over because the cars were left on the grid, and obviously because the Formula One cars, like everything is cooled by
Yeah.
airflow, and so when the cars are stationary, no air is flowing through them and cooling the parts, and so mechanics would have to know like whether they could go onto the track to cool their cars, because otherwise things would start breaking. And so it took the FIA quite a while before they ultimately decided to let the mechanics go and take care of the cars, because Sonoda, when he pulled over, he couldn't get his car into neutral, so it was left
Yeah.
in gear, and so that meant that the mechanics couldn't push it out of the way, and so they had to actually get a crane to lift it back up. So there was like some confusion, but ultimately then the FIA made the call that mechanics could go work on the cars and go cool
Yeah.
them before they did the extra formation lap.
Yep. So at the end of the extra formation lap now, it would be time to see the cars launch off the line for proper this time. And at lights out, it was a good start from Max Verstappen, who looked initially like he was going to get ahead of Carlos Sainz, but Sainz quickly blocked him off and forced Verstappen to the outside. And Leclerc was now in the slipstream of his teammate, looking to go down the inside of Verstappen, but Verstappen just broke that much later, and it was Sainz in the lead. And through the first chicane now, it was Sainz from Verstappen. Russell was challenging Leclerc, and Sergio Perez had gotten ahead of Oscar Piastri, and Albon was now ahead of Lando Norris and putting pressure on Piastri, but Russell was putting so much pressure on Carlos Sainz through the Curva Grande, and they were wheel to wheel through the to the De La Roja chicane, and Sainz just broke that much later on the inside and kept his position in P3. Leclerc kept his position in P3.
Yep, now going on to lap 2, and we saw Alex Albon challenging Oscar Piastri through the Curva Grande. The Williams and the McLaren were going wheel to wheel.
Yeah.
Albon was going down the inside at Oscar Piastri, which turned into the outside and then the inside at the De La Roggia chicane. And Albon managed to put his Williams up into 6th place behind the Red Bulls, Ferraris, and a Mercedes. So Alex Albon was pushing
Yeah.
so hard this weekend. All the while, Logan Sargent couldn't get past Liam Lawson, who's only had one Grand Prix before him, and Sargent was still struggling to get past him.
I mean, yeah, he was closing up, but still like stuck in that DRS train. But out front, a man who was closing up was Max Verstappen, who was a man on a mission in this race. And by lap 6, he with DRS, it was a couple laps coming, but Verstappen was now closing up to Carlos Sainz, and he tried to go around the outside of Sainz, which then would turn to the inside, but Sainz just broke that much later and forced Verstappen onto the curb, and Verstappen had to slam on the brakes, or else he would have gone into the curb and recreated Monza 2021, where he crashed into Lewis Hamilton, if you remember that. But there were just enough cars without Verstappen being forced onto the grass, and Leclerc was now closing up to Verstappen because of how much Sainz was holding him up.
Yeah, the wheel-to-wheel action between Verstappen and Sainz would definitely help Leclerc
Yeah.
as he tried to close in onto the pack. And going on to lap 14, Verstappen was close enough, but he still couldn't get past Carlos Sainz. But further back, we saw Perez and Russell
Yeah.
going wheel to wheel. Perez was trying to attack Russell, and they both ultimately went off the track. And I think it was here that like Perez said that he pushed him off or something,
Yeah.
when it was very obvious that Perez didn't get pushed off, and he in fact went off the track at his own accord. And so
Yeah.
it was like, I mean, obviously I get the adrenaline and stuff, but it's still like, I mean, you should know if you went off by yourself or if you legitimately get pushed off. So I don't know what he was trying to
Yeah.
get with by saying that, but both of them went off, so the FIA didn't really take any action.
Yeah, and this is where we saw the first round of pit stops, sort of, because Liam Lawson was coming into the pit lane, and so this would kind of trigger the first round of pit stops. On lap 15, we saw Max Verstappen closing in on Carlos Sainz, and once again just couldn't make a move. But Sainz then locked up, and now that put even more pressure on him as Verstappen was getting a really good exit and was now going wheel to wheel with Carlos Sainz through the Curva Grande, and he was on the outside, which became the inside to the corner, and Verstappen just went down the inside and into the lead.
Yeah, obviously, as a Ferrari fan, I was pretty sad when this happened
Yeah,
because I knew Verstappen would just bolt away at this point. So, but I still like it was a really great effort from Carlos Sainz.
yeah,
You can tell the Ferraris so far were giving it everything to try to win in front of the Tifosi here, and it
yeah.
was a really great drive from Carlos Sainz to keep ahead of Verstappen for 15 laps.
Yeah. And then on to lap 16. Now it was Sergio Perez who finally gotten past George Russell and moved up into P4. And Perez will now start to be smelling that podium finish and seeing if he can rebound a run of miserable results for him. And also on lap 24 now, we saw the two McLarens getting very close to each other and actually making contact as Norris got past Piastri, who was coming out of the pit lane. Norris just tapped Piastri. It was Norris's rear right tire to Piastri's front left tire. They just touched, but not too much, and it was enough for both of them to keep running. It wasn't too much damage.
Now going on to lap 32, again we saw drivers getting close together. Obviously, going back to that Piastri and Norris incident, actually,
Yeah,
it was like at turn one again, it gets very tight, and
yeah,
Piastri on cold tires, and Norris thought he left him enough space, but Piastri just physically couldn't turn
yeah,
enough. Same thing almost happened here on lap 32, but Leclerc was sensible with it and decided to stick behind Perez into turn one, as Perez finally overtook the Ferrari into turn one, and Perez was on the podium now. And I think here Ferrari soon realized that whichever
yeah,
of their drivers finished higher would be the one finishing on the podium, because
yeah,
they were now battling for third and fourth instead of for the lead. Going on to lap 40 now, we saw Piastri, who had fallen back from Norris, was getting attacked by Lewis Hamilton into the Della Roggia chicane. They actually both went off the track, and so it was pretty bizarre because they'd been really close, but both Piastri and Hamilton going
yeah,
off was pretty unusual. Normally, only one of them would go off into the Della Roggia chicane, but that was pretty weird. And the same thing tried to happen on lap 41 between Hamilton and Piastri as they went side by side into the Della Roggia chicane. Hamilton was ahead, but then he
yeah,
came across Oscar Piastri, and that broke Oscar Piastri's front wing, and Hamilton left unscathed, I think. But it was not Lewis Hamilton's finest moment. It was sort of a rookie error from Lewis
yeah,
Hamilton, not leaving the cars with there. The same thing happened to Hamilton in Monza 2019 when
yeah. I
Leclerc
remember
didn't leave
that.
him enough room. So this time Hamilton doing the same thing. You wouldn't expect that from a seven-time world champion, and you would expect that from Piastri, in fact, because I keep forgetting Piastri is actually a rookie this year, but he's
Yeah.
definitely not driving like one. He's driving so much better, but ultimately a shame for Piastri that his race got ruined.
Yeah, and also this incident meant that Hamilton had to go into the pits, which meant it promoted Logan Sargent up, or it DNF'd, not DNF'd, it moved Oscar Piastri down, not Lewis Hamilton, but it meant that Logan Sargent was now running in the World Championship points in P10, but with Bottas all over his tail, just 5 tenths back, and just that gap was ever closing now. On lap 43, we saw Perez trying to make a move on Carlos Sainz to get second place, and Leclerc was now all over the back of them, and Perez once again just cut the curb at turn 1 and went straight on and overtook Carlos Sainz. But then obviously he gave the position back and now is chasing after Carlos Sainz again.
Yeah, again on lap 43, then we also saw or on lap 45, then we saw Lewis Hamilton finally get past Lando Norris into the first chicane, and we
Yeah.
also saw Valtteri Bottas get past Logan Sargent to get into the final World Championship points
Yeah.
position.
On lap 46 now, Sergio Perez was putting the pressure on Carlos Sainz and trying to go around the outside at turn 1, and finally Perez got his man and was up into P2. He went sort of deep, but now he was up into P2, and now it was a battle between Leclerc and Sainz to see which Ferrari driver could finish on the podium. And on lap 47, Leclerc was now with DRS, was moving past Carlos Sainz, and into the first corner, Leclerc on the inside of Carlos Sainz moved up into P3, but then he locked up and went deep, and this allowed Sainz to now get a switchback, and the Ferrari drivers are now going wheel to wheel down the Curva Grande and towards the Della Roggia chicane, and it was incredible racing to see the two Ferrari drivers racing at Monza. But the outside line turned into the inside for Carlos Sainz, and he was able to get the position ahead of Charles Leclerc and move back up into P3.
They both went off again at the
Yeah,
Della Roggia chicane, like we saw Piastri and Hamilton. So the Ferraris were definitely going at it
yeah,
with each other. It was hard but clean racing, and it was definitely, in my opinion, the best battle we've seen so far this year. They were just throwing everything at it to get onto that podium and trying to get bragging rights for the who was the better driver
yeah.
at Ferrari, and obviously just trying to put on a good show for the Tifosi.
Yeah, moving on to the final lap now. Leclerc was going to give it everything on this final lap, and he certainly gave it everything into turn 1 as he tried to sell the dummy on Sainz. He moved to the inside and went to the outside, but then locked both front wheels and had to take to the runoff road, and which meant he temporarily overtook Carlos Sainz, but then gave the position back. And now they would just be racing all the way to the end, and Leclerc was certainly going to give everything. But a man who didn't have to give everything and was just cruising out in front was Max Verstappen as he crossed the line to win the Italian Grand Prix and make it 10 wins in a row, breaking the all-time record of 9 in a row set by Sebastian Vettel. He made it 10.
Yeah, it was a monumental moment for Max Verstappen, who could cement his place as definitely, well, he already has, as one of the greatest racers in Formula One.
Yeah,
Sergio Perez came home for second to make it another Red Bull 1-2, and right at the end we saw Leclerc giving it everything out of the Parabolica,
yeah,
trying to get past Carlos Sainz. He had so much oversteer coming out of the
yeah,
Parabolica. He almost put it into the wall like he did in 2020. But that just
yeah,
shows how hard he was trying to get past Sainz. But
yeah,
it was almost side by side over the line for the two Ferraris at
yeah,
Monza. Sainz ahead of Leclerc, and it was a great battle to see and great respect between the two drivers in red, and it was really
yeah.
fun to watch. This Italian Grand Prix was so good.
Yeah. So once again it was looking good for Verstappen in the drivers championship and in the constructors championship. Now Red Bull had the opportunity to seal it in Singapore next time around. So we would have to see until then. But thank you guys for listening to this episode of our podcast, and be sure to join us next time as we take a look at the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix. Thank
2023 Singapore
2023
Grand
Singapore Grand Prix. Thank you.